What was Sidious's reaction when he found out the Death Star had been destroyed? Greetings again, Acolytes, and welcome back to the Archives. For over 2 decades, Palpatine had carefully laid the plans for the Death Star. It was to be his crowning jewel, the ultimate weapon, and the prize of his success. The Death Star might have even been described as a physical representation of Palpatine's total supremacy. Many believed that Palpatine's goal was the destruction of the Jedi and the raising of the Empire, but that was only a small part of it. Total galactic dominance was always the goal. The DS-1 battle station was to be the enforcer of that control, and Palpatine had so much confidence in the superweapon that he dissolved the Imperial Senate and ignored the advice of Vader and Thrawn, both of them who questioned the allocation of the resources to build the Death Star, only for the complete project to literally go up in flames. In the films, we don't get to see what Palpatine actually thought about the obliteration and the loss of his grand prize, but in the 2015 Vader comic series, we get the full picture in canon about how he felt. And my friends, it was not pretty at all for someone like Palpatine, who was not used to losing, to lose the grand gem of the Empire. But what's even more important is how this completely changed Palpatine's approach to the war and to Darth Vader. In the first comic of the series, Vader is reporting to Palpatine about a run-in he had with the rebels that he saw aboard the Death Star. This of course was Luke and the gang in A New Hope. Although Vader is unaware that this is his son, he reports that they had recently destroyed an Imperial construction depot, and Vader was debriefing on the events. However, Palpatine was not interested in hearing about the failures of others. He was more concerned with the failure of his apprentice. He then says this to Vader: "We kept the skeleton of the Republic for nearly 20 years while the Death Star was constructed. 20 years, my apprentice. All that planning is now a layer of dust orbiting around Yavin. Now we no longer have the Senate to hold order. We do not have the Death Star to force it. Our greatest weapon is gone. Our production is in ashes. We are besieged. In all these years, we have never skirted closer to disaster. All thanks to you." The first thing Sidious does is bring up his concern about the Empire's ability to maintain order. He mentions that they no longer have the Senate or the Death Star to keep order in a gentle or a harsh way. I personally find this fascinating that Sidious's first concern was his ability to keep the law as Emperor. Despite what most believe, Palpatine was not a mindless tyrant, but one who was always keeping a close eye on the state of the galaxy and how its citizens perceived him. No longer was it just merely a concern for insurgencies, rebel cells, or insolent planetary rulers. The Empire and Palpatine now have a real, tangible enemy, that being the Rebel Alliance, one that had avoided the wrath of the Empire, and now had scored a victory. The image of an invincible military government now had an unsightly crack right on its face, and Palpatine was panicking. His worst fears came true as people signed up in droves to support the rebels. Individuals such as the Mon Calamari, who actually supplied them with capital ships. But not only was the Death Star gone, but Palpatine acknowledges the issue with the fact that he himself had dissolved the Senate. The regular people of the galaxy no longer had any representation when it came to matters of state, and Palpatine was the absolute dictator. He had antagonized the Empire against the galaxy with the destruction of Alderaan, and the average citizens were not happy with the Imperial elected governors now ruling over them. Without the representatives of the Senate elected by the individual people to soothe their growing anxiety, riots and insurgencies now threatened to be more prominent and powerful than ever. Not only did Palpatine lose the Death Star, but the stability of his rule. This explains why in Empire Strikes Back, the Empire takes a much more active role, such as invading places like Cloud City to take control of their assets, capturing whatever rebels they could. In response to this also, quite interestingly, the Empire also started doing more business with the Hutt cartel, doing so to secure eyes in the Outer Rim and to collect skilled bounty hunters to succeed where Imperial agents were consistently failing. People started receiving rougher treatment, which inspired criminal organizations like the Black Sun to rise up and actively fight against the Empire for their own cause and gain, acting like libertarians. All of this as a result from Sidious's own panic and not having any sort of sure way to keep the citizens in line after the Death Star. However, something positive did come out of this for the Emperor. He openly admits that he placed far too much confidence in the Death Star's abilities. He even commends General Tag for speaking out against the Empire placing all of the eggs in one basket. So much so that Tag would receive a promotion for his insight. Sidious had this to say. Tag always argued against the arrogance of the Death Star as a sole weapon. He alone was properly wary of the rebels' threat. While the second Death Star is constructed, his philosophy must be dominant. It was lucky he left the station before its destruction to return to his beloved fleet, or I would have no one else I could use. He is to assume primacy. You will act according to his will. In Return of the Jedi, the Emperor doesn't put command of the Death Star in the hands of another officer. Having learned from the hubris of Tarkin and Mati, he still doesn't even trust Vader to oversee the project himself. Palpatine personally arrives on the DS-2 and puts it in his command. However, I want to focus specifically on the last line of the previous quote. In an insulting turn of events, the Emperor demotes Vader, placing him under the jurisdiction of Grand General Tag. The most important part of Palpatine's reaction that we've been saving for this last is that he blames Vader entirely for the failure of the Death Star. Enraged at his apprentice, Palpatine doesn't opt for physical torture as punishment, but instead goes much deeper. Vader's pride and his freedom. He demotes his apprentice, a Sith Lord who is supposed to be the Emperor's number 2 and command respect throughout the Imperial military, and places him in service of Tag. This would actually be one of the main conflicts throughout the entire run of the 2015 Vader comic. The Dark Lord struggling to accomplish his tasks while having to be beholden to a non-Force sensitive commander. But the demotion was only the beginning. Palpatine makes sure to go for Vader's jugular, and he has his first mission to be on Tatooine, even remarking to Vader that it should be sentimental for him. To insult Vader further, Palpatine gives him a personal escort, an Imperial overseer. Vader would constantly attempt to abandon or murder them, but every time he turned around, a new overseer was sent. While all of this was occurring, Sidious's rage and disappointment towards Vader now reached a boiling point, and he enlisted the service of a man by the name of Dr. Silo. Silo previously helped build Vader's suit post-Mustafar. Behind Vader's back, Palpatine and Silo created several cybernetic warriors who could wield lightsabers, all of them greatly inspired by General Grievous. The Mad Doctor had altered a group of various organic beings to be spliced with machinery, with the goal of all of them to threaten Vader's role as the Hand of the Emperor. Vader would slowly uncover these schemes, and believed that a lot of Sidious's anger was misplaced. Vader would come to the realization that Palpatine blamed Vader for the destruction of the Death Star, because he had too much hubris to blame himself. As time went on, and Dr. Silo and Vader came into constant conflict, Dr. Silo would lose his mind to insanity, outright attempting to kill Lord Vader with his creations, and would even go as far as holding the Emperor hostage. However, the Dark Lord Vader overcame all of these obstacles and slew each one of Silo's creations, destroying the Mad Doctor's scheme. After all was said and done, Sidious revealed that the entire thing had been a setup from the beginning and was a test of Vader's will and whether or not he was truly worthy to still be a Sith. Pleased with the outcome, Sidious determined that his apprentice had redeemed himself, and his position was reinstated. It was here where he was gifted the Super Star Destroyer, the Executor. So to boil it down, what was Sidious's core reaction? Of course, he was furious that all of his hard work and planning had gone down the drain, and while he did punish Vader for this failure, in the end, Vader would be surprised that his reaction was not more severe, with Vader determining that it wasn't because they already had the resources to build a second, larger Death Star, with the project already in the works by the time Vader reported back. The Death Star 2 would be much larger, much more powerful, and could be constructed at a much faster rate. This all turned out to be a massive test to if Vader was worthy to defend the second Death Star, the new greatest weapon of the Empire. And in the end, Vader proved that he was in fact worthy. But anyway, my friends, this was how Sidious reacted to the destruction of the Death Star. Tell us, what do you think about the Emperor after the Battle of Yavin, and how he admitted his own mistakes, but ultimately would blame Vader wrongfully in our opinion? Do you believe that the destruction of the first Death Star was ultimately an eye-opening event for Sidious, or did he fail to learn from his mistake? Again, be sure to check out the Star Wars merch page for the holiday deals. And as always, may the Force be with you.